You feel it, don't you? That hollow ache in your chest when someone talks over you, as if your presence were nothing more than background noise. Your first instinct, the instinct of the weak, is to push back, to raise your voice, to offer a frantic explanation for why you deserve to be heard. You think that by filling the room with your words, you are claiming your space. But in reality, you are doing the opposite. By chasing validation from those who do not respect you, you have handed your leash to the world. You have become a puppet, twitching and dancing to the rhythm of other people's opinions, desperate for a nod of approval that will never come. This is the tragedy of the common man. He is a slave to the reactions of others. He is predictable. He is loud. And because he is loud, he is easily managed. But there is another way, a colder, more surgical way to exist. Thomas Shelby does not seek attention. He commands the very atmosphere of a room by strategically withholding his presence. He understands that attention is not something you beg for. It is something you extort through the power of your silence. Today, we are stripping away the layers of your social desperation. I am going to teach you how to weaponize your absence and turn your indifference into a lethal instrument of control. By the end of this journey, you will no longer be the one seeking to be noticed. You will make your silence the loudest, most deafening thing in any room you enter. You will become untouchable, moving through the world with the cold, calculated grace of a sovereign. What Thomas Shelby mastered in the soot-stained alleys of Birmingham, Niccolò Machiavelli codified in the velvet-draped courts of 16th-century Florence. They understood a truth that most are too fragile to accept. Power is not found in what you say, but in what you refuse to acknowledge. If you are ready to stop being a background character in your own life and start building an empire of the self, like this video and subscribe to the Architecture of Power. Comment "I am sovereign" below to signal that you have finally chosen the path of the strategist over the path of the herd. Welcome to the assembly of the cold-blooded. The first rule of the Shelby Doctrine is a masterclass in psychological warfare. Never react to a provocation you did not personally schedule. To understand the sheer lethality of this indifference, we must look at the moment Thomas Shelby first stepped into the lion's den of Billy Kimber. Imagine the scene. The air is thick with the smell of horse manure and cheap tobacco. Billy Kimber, a man who rules the race courses with a loud mouth and a hair-trigger temper, is surrounded by his muscle. He is used to men trembling, stuttering, or trying to match his aggression. He thrives on the reaction of others because that reaction is his fuel. When Tommy walks in, Kimber is already shouting. He is posturing, insulting the Shelbys, and attempting to establish a hierarchy through noise. But look closely at Thomas. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't offer a witty retort. He doesn't even look angry. Instead, he stands there with a cigarette dangling from his lips, his eyes as cold and vacant as the midwinter sky. He treats Kimber's explosive ego not as a threat, but as a minor, slightly irritating inconvenience, like a fly buzzing around a man who is busy calculating the trajectory of a bullet. By refusing to mirror Kimber's energy, Tommy effectively castrates Kimber's power. He remains the center of gravity, while Kimber orbits him like a frantic, desperate moon. The psychology behind this is profound. Thomas Shelby understands that in any high-stakes interaction, the first person to react emotionally has already lost. When you react to an insult or a provocation, you are giving your opponent a map of your vulnerabilities. You are telling them exactly where the skin is thin. Tommy, however, operates from a place of radical internal sovereignty. He has already processed the potential for violence, the potential for insult, and the potential for failure long before he entered the room. Because he has pre-visualized the conflict, nothing Kimber says can catch him off guard. He is not ignoring Kimber out of laziness. He is ignoring him as a strategic choice to starve Kimber of the feedback he needs to continue his assault. It is a vacuum of response that leaves the aggressor feeling foolish, exposed, and eventually terrified. This is the exact strategy Niccolò Machiavelli advocated for in the pages of The Prince. Machiavelli taught that a ruler must be a great simulator and dissimulator. To simulate is to pretend to have what you don't. To dissimulate is to hide what you truly feel. Machiavelli knew that a prince who is easily read is a prince who is easily toppled. By showing no emotion, by maintaining a facade of absolute, unwavering calm, you deprive your enemy of a target. If they cannot see your anger, they cannot use it against you. If they cannot see your fear, they cannot exploit it. You become a blank wall, and there is nothing more frustrating or intimidating to a person seeking power than a wall that refuses to echo their own noise. In the modern world, the concrete jungle of corporate offices, social circles, and digital landscapes, the common man is constantly defending his honor. Someone makes a snide comment on a Slack channel or a backhanded compliment at a bar, and the common man immediately feels the heat rise in his chest. He feels the need to set the record straight or defend himself. By doing so, he admits that the other person's words have the power to disturb his peace. He elevates the provocateur to his own level. He reveals that his self-worth is tied to the perception of others. The man of power, the modern Shelby, moves differently. He understands that responding to an insult is an admission that the insult has weight. He knows that his time and his emotional energy are limited resources, and he refuses to spend them on beggars who are only looking for a reaction to feel relevant. When you are faced with a social bait today, you must apply the 3-second rule of sovereignty. When someone attempts to mock you or undermine you in front of a group, do not look away and do not bark back. Look them directly in the eyes for 3 full seconds, not with anger, but with a clinical, detached curiosity. Let the silence stretch until it becomes uncomfortable for everyone else. Then, without acknowledging the insult at all, turn back to your task or your previous conversation. By doing this, you are sending a clear, unspoken message. You are not significant enough to warrant my anger. This is the ultimate form of dominance in social chess. You are not fighting for a seat at the table. You are demonstrating that you own the room. You are treating the provocateur as a non-player character in your story. This level of indifference is far more damaging to an opponent's ego than any insult could ever be. It signals a terrifying level of self-control and a complete lack of need for external validation. It makes people wonder what you know that they don't. It makes them fear the silence that you inhabit. To master the law of calculated indifference is to master yourself. It is the realization that your internal state is a fortress, and the only people who get to enter are those you have specifically invited. Everyone else is just noise at the gates. You must become the architect of your own reactions. If you didn't schedule a conflict, do not participate in it. If the provocation doesn't lead to a tangible gain in your career, your status, or your empire, ignore it with the same coldness Thomas Shelby used to dismantle the kings of the underworld. Remember, the lion does not turn his head when the small dogs bark. He keeps walking toward his prey. Your prey is your vision, your goal, your sovereignty. Everything else is just smoke in the wind. Stay cold. Stay calculated. Stay sovereign. Proximo. Information is the lifeblood of any empire, but its true power lies not in its acquisition, but in its containment. The second law of the Shelby doctrine is absolute. Silence is a vault, and once you speak, the gold is gone. To witness this mastery of informational monopoly, we must look at the psychological chess match between Thomas Shelby and Inspector Chester Campbell. Throughout their long and bitter rivalry, Campbell is a man driven by a desperate, almost pathological need to be seen as the moral and intellectual superior. He is a man of many words, threats, sermons, and boasts, all designed to fill the space and assert his authority. But Thomas Shelby understands something Campbell never will. The more you talk, the more you reveal the boundaries of your own mind. Think of their encounters in those dimly lit rooms, or on the fog-swept bridges of Birmingham. Campbell arrives with the full weight of the crown behind him, barking orders and making grandiose promises of destruction. He expects Tommy to negotiate, to plead, or at the very least, to explain himself. Instead, Tommy gives him nothing but the cold, reflective surface of a man who knows exactly what he holds. In one specific instance, while Campbell is detailing the ways he could hang the entire Shelby family, Tommy simply lights a cigarette and stares. He doesn't offer a defense. He doesn't correct Campbell's assumptions. He lets the silence stretch until the air in the room becomes heavy with the weight of what has not been said. This is the asymmetry of information. Because Tommy says nothing, Campbell is forced to fill the void with his own anxieties. He begins to speculate, to guess, and eventually to make mistakes. By maintaining a monopoly on his own thoughts, Tommy remains the architect of the interaction, while Campbell becomes nothing more than a victim of his own imagination. The psychology at play here is what we call the projection of the void. When you refuse to provide information, the human brain, which is wired to seek patterns and closure, will automatically attempt to fill that silence. In a conflict, your opponent will project their own greatest fears onto your silence. If you are quiet, they assume you have a plan they haven't accounted for. If you are still, they assume you are waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Thomas Shelby's silence isn't a lack of communication. It is a high-level form of communication that says, "I know things you don't, and you are not important enough for me to share them with." This internal sovereignty is what allows him to move through the world without ever being truly touched by the threats of men like Campbell. He understands that every word spoken is a potential vulnerability, a small leak in the hull of his ship. By sealing the vault, he stays afloat, while his enemies drown in their own chatter. Niccolò Machiavelli, the master strategist of the Renaissance, understood this principle with chilling clarity. In The Prince, he warned that a wise ruler should follow a path that prevents him from ever being at the mercy of others. Being at the mercy of someone often starts with giving them too much information. Machiavelli believed that the prince must be a master of deception and secrecy, not because he is inherently evil, but because the world is a dangerous place where information is the ultimate currency of survival. If your enemies know your intentions, they can block them. If they know your weaknesses, they can exploit them. If they know your heart, they can break it. Therefore, the prince must keep his true counsel hidden behind a mask of indifference. He must speak only when it serves a specific strategic purpose, and even then, he must speak in a way that leaves his true position obscured. This is not about lying, it is about the economy of truth. You only reveal what is necessary to move the chess piece, and not a single syllable more. In the modern landscape, the common man has been brainwashed by the cult of authenticity and oversharing. He believes that by being an open book, he is building trust and connection. In reality, he is just making himself cheap. He goes to a job interview and talks about his anxieties. He goes on a date and reveals his past traumas. He enters a business meeting and explains every detail of his strategy before the contract is even signed. He is constantly bleeding information, and then wonders why he feels so drained and why people don't respect his boundaries. He has no vault. He has no gold. He is just a pile of loose change, easily counted and easily spent by anyone who cares to look. He seeks connection through vulnerability. But in the arena of power, vulnerability is just another word for an opening. To apply the Shelby monopoly today, you must treat your words as a limited resource. In your professional life, practice the power pause. When a boss or a client asks you a question, do not rush to answer to prove how on top of it you are. Wait 5 full seconds. Look them in the eye. Let the silence do the work. Often, in those 5 seconds, the other person will feel the need to keep talking, revealing more about their true needs or their own insecurities. When you finally do speak, keep your answer surgical. Eliminate all filler words. No, no, I think, no, maybe. State your position as a fact, and then stop. Do not explain your reasoning unless explicitly asked, and even then, provide the bare minimum. In your social life, stop being the person who fills every awkward silence with a joke or a story. Become the person who is comfortable in the quiet. When you are the one who can handle the silence, you are the one who controls the room. Information is a weapon. Keep yours holstered until the moment you intend to fire. The third law of the sovereign mind is perhaps the most brutal. Strategic non-recognition. In the world of Thomas Shelby, if a person does not serve the vision, they simply do not exist. They are ghosts in his machine. This is not about being mean or rude. Those are emotional responses that require energy. This is about psychological erasure. The most powerful example of this occurred when the Italian-American mob boss, Luca Changretta, entered Tommy's office. Luca is a man who defines himself by his status, his expensive suits, and the terror his name inspires. He enters the room expecting an explosion of tension, a standoff, or at the very least, Tommy's full and undivided attention. He wants to see the fear in Tommy's eyes because that fear confirms Luca's own power. But Tommy Shelby is a master of the empty gaze. As Luca stands there, posturing and threatening the very existence of the Shelby family, Tommy doesn't even look up at first. He continues to work on his ledgers. He peels an apple. He focuses on the mundane tasks of his business as if Luca were nothing more than a delivery boy who arrived at the wrong door. Even when he does acknowledge Luca, he does so with a detached, clinical coldness, treating the threat of a blood feud as if it were a minor logistical problem to be solved. By refusing to recognize Luca's status, Tommy effectively strips him of it. He denies Luca the ego fuel he traveled across the Atlantic to collect. In that office, Luca Changretta, a man who commands an army, is reduced to a buzzing insect because Thomas Shelby refuses to grant him the dignity of being a peer. The psychology of non-recognition is a form of status deprivation. Every human being has a deep-seated psychological need to be acknowledged, especially by those they perceive as rivals or superiors. When you acknowledge someone, even through anger or hatred, you are validating their existence and their importance. You are saying, "You are a factor in my world." When you strategically withdraw that recognition, you are attacking their very sense of self. It is a psychological vacuum that causes the other person to feel small, insignificant, and increasingly desperate. In the scene with Luca, Tommy's indifference causes Luca to become more theatrical, more aggressive, and, ultimately, more prone to the kind of emotional errors that Tommy will later exploit. By treating his enemy as irrelevant, Tommy makes them irrelevant. He controls the hierarchy of the room not by climbing to the top, but by refusing to admit that a ladder even exists. This aligns perfectly with Machiavelli's chilling observation that it is far better to be feared than loved, if one cannot be both. Most people spend their lives trying to be liked or loved through politeness and constant social validation. They nod their heads when people speak. They smile at everyone, and they try to make everyone feel included. Machiavelli saw this as a fatal flaw. To be loved is to be at the mercy of the fickle emotions of the masses. But to be feared, not through mindless violence, but through the cold removal of humanity, is to be sovereign. Strategic non-recognition is a form of civilized fear. It creates an aura around you that says you are not easily reached. You are not a nice guy who is part of the group. You are a force of nature that chooses where to direct its attention. When you ignore someone who expects your recognition, you are asserting a terrifying level of dominance. You are proving that your internal world is so complete that you don't need to play the social games of the common man. In the modern world, the homum comum is a slave to social etiquette. He is polite to people he dislikes. He laughs at jokes that aren't funny. He nods along to conversations that bore him because he is afraid of the social tax of being perceived as cold. He is a people-pleaser who has spread himself so thin that he has no substance left. He thinks he is being good, but he is actually being weak. He is giving away his most valuable asset, his recognition, to anyone who asks for it, making it worthless in the process. He is a background character in other people's stories, constantly providing the likes and nods that fuel their egos while his own empire lies in ruins. To apply the law of strategic non-recognition, you must begin to audit your social interactions with ruthless efficiency. Stop nodding your head when people speak, unless they have said something that genuinely adds value to your vision. When you are in a social or professional setting, and someone who is irrelevant to your goals tries to engage you in small talk or gossip, do not offer a polite smile. Give them a still face. Look at them. Acknowledge that they have spoken with a slight, almost imperceptible tilt of the head, and then look away. Do not provide the social cues that tell them to keep talking. If a person is a time vampire, someone who drains your energy without providing any strategic benefit, treat them with the same cold indifference Tommy showed Luca. You don't need to be aggressive. You just need to be absent. If they don't serve the vision, they do not exist. Your attention is the sun. Do not waste its light on the shadows. By withholding your recognition, you make it a rare and precious commodity. When you do finally choose to look at someone, to nod, or to speak, it will have the weight of a royal decree. You are not just a man in a room. You are the sovereign of your own reality, and you decide who is worthy of being seen. In the theater of high-stakes negotiation, there is no figure more volatile, more theatrical, and more dangerous than Alfie Solomons. He is a man who uses noise as a blunt force instrument. To walk into Alfie's Camden Town warehouse is to enter a storm of shouting, sudden movements, and psychological intimidation. Alfie is the master of the social flair. He creates massive amounts of heat and light to distract his opponent from the cold reality of the deal. He screams, he mocks, he invades personal space, and he uses his Jewish mysticism and rhythmic speech to weave a web of confusion. Most men, when confronted with this level of raw, aggressive energy, feel a biological imperative to match it. They raise their voices. They lean in. They get defensive. They allow Alfie to dictate the tempo of the interaction, and the moment they do, they have already lost the chess match. But observe Thomas Shelby in these moments. While Alfie is pacing like a caged beast, shouting about the line that has been crossed and the wrath of God, Tommy remains a statue. He does not move a muscle in response to Alfie's outbursts. He sits, often with a glass of gin in one hand and a cigarette in the other, his body language completely closed off and impenetrable. He creates a void of reaction. No matter how loud Alfie gets, The sound simply disappears into the abyss of Tommy's composure. By refusing to mirror Alfie's energy, Tommy forces the energy to dissipate. He makes Alfie's theatricality look like a desperate performance rather than a show of strength. When Alfie stops screaming to catch his breath, he is met with a silence so profound that it forces him to realize he hasn't moved Tommy an inch. This is the moment where the power shifts. Because Tommy did not react, Alfie is the one who feels exposed. He has shown his hand, exhausted his lungs, and revealed his tactics, while Tommy remains exactly where he started, in total control of himself. The internal psychology of Thomas Shelby is built on the understanding that every reaction is a leak of power. Tommy views social interactions as a form of energy management. He knows that Alfie is trying to bait him into an emotional state, anger, fear, or even humor, because an emotional man is a predictable man. By maintaining a flat affect, Tommy keeps his internal gears hidden. He is not just keeping a straight face, he is actively choosing to reside in the void. He understands that the person who sets the temperature of the room is the person who is most comfortable with their own stillness. In his mind, Alfie's noise is just data. He filters through the shouting to find the effectual truth of the negotiation, ignoring the insults and the posturing as if they were nothing more than static on a radio. He waits for the silence to return, knowing that silence is the only terrain where a strategist can truly operate. He lets the other man exhaust himself against the wall of his indifference, waiting for the inevitable moment when the noise stops and the real business begins. This is the ultimate application of the Machiavellian principle of the lion and the fox. Niccolò Machiavelli famously stated that a prince must be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves. However, the most sophisticated version of this strategy is using the fox's cunning to let others trap themselves in their own lion-like aggression. Machiavelli understood that pure force is often a mask for vulnerability. A man who has to scream to be heard is a man who fears he is being ignored. By adopting the fox's stillness, you allow the lions around you to roar until they are hoarse. You let them reveal their positions, their temperaments, and their weaknesses. Machiavelli knew that the most dangerous man in the room is not the one holding the sword high and shouting for blood, but the one sitting in the corner, watching the shouting, and calculating exactly when the shouter will tire. To inhabit the void is to be the fox who knows that the lion's noise is his greatest trap. You do not need to fight the noise, you only need to survive it until the noisemaker is depleted. The common man, the man of the masses, is a mirror. If someone is happy, he smiles. If someone is angry, he gets defensive. If someone speaks loudly, he raises his voice to be heard. He is a victim of social contagion, constantly allowing the energy of others to dictate his internal state. Because he is so reactive, he is incredibly easy to manipulate. All an opponent has to do to throw him off balance is create a little bit of friction. He values harmony and rapport over sovereignty, and so he is always adjusting himself to fit the room. He is a weather vane, spinning frantically with every change in the social wind. He thinks he is being engaged, but he is actually being drained. He ends every interaction feeling exhausted because he has spent all his emotional currency trying to keep up with the pace set by others. He is a background player who takes his cues from the leads, never realizing that he could be the one directing the scene. To master the void of reaction in the modern landscape, you must become the anchor of every room you enter. When you are in a heated argument or a high-pressure meeting, your primary objective is to lower your own physiological baseline. Do the opposite of what your instincts demand. If the other person speaks faster, you speak slower. If they raise their volume, you lower yours until they are forced to lean in to hear you. This is low-frequency dominance. By reducing your volume and slowing your cadence, you signal that you are not under stress. You signal that you are the sovereign. When someone attempts to provoke you with an insult or a power move, treat it like a technical glitch in a machine. Watch them, observe the movement of their mouth and the tension in their neck with the detached interest of a scientist. Do not offer a single micro-expression of annoyance. When they finish their tirade, wait for a full 4 seconds of silence before responding in a calm, flat tone. This silence is the abyss. It forces the other person to confront the reality that they have no power over you. The less you react, the more they lose control of themselves. This is how you win the game before the first move is even made. In the pursuit of sovereignty, you must realize that your attention is not a gift. It is a high-value currency, and the world is filled with beggars trying to steal it from you. The fifth law of the Shelby doctrine is the sovereignty of focus. Thomas Shelby is a man who has built an empire while surrounded by the constant shrieking noise of family dysfunction, betrayal, and trauma. Think of the chaotic dinner tables at Arrow House or the frantic meetings in the betting shop. His brother Arthur is spiraling into cocaine-fueled rages. His Aunt Polly is haunted by spirits and past sins. The younger Shelbys are chasing skirts and getting into street brawls. To a common man, this environment would be a total distraction. He would get pulled into every argument, try to fix every emotional wound, and lose sight of the objective in the fog of family drama. But watch Thomas. He sits at the head of the table, and while the world around him is burning with emotion, his eyes are fixed on something miles away. The expansion of the Shelby Company Limited. He acknowledges the outbursts with a nod or a short command, but he refuses to let the social tax of his family's chaos deplete his mental reserves. He understands that every minute spent arguing with a brother who won't listen is a minute stolen from the strategy that will keep them all alive. He treats his attention as a state resource. He does not spend it on people who are not contributing to the vision, even if those people carry his own blood. This is the ruthless filter. Tommy knows that to lead, he must be the only person in the room who is not distracted by the room. His focus is his armor, and his ability to ignore the unearned noise of his environment is what allows him to see the moves his enemies haven't even thought of yet. The internal psychology here is the total rejection of emotional labor. Tommy understands that he cannot be both the architect of an empire and the therapist for his soldiers. He delegates the emotional maintenance to others or leaves it to rot, because he knows that the effectual truth of his existence is the survival and growth of the organization. He has developed a form of target lock. Once he has identified the objective, whether it's the Russian jewels or the repeal of the Corn Laws, everything else becomes background noise. He doesn't ignore his family because he doesn't care. He ignores their distractions because he cares about the outcome more than the process. He is willing to be perceived as cold, distant, or even unfeeling, because he knows that the warmth of a family circle is useless if that circle is standing in a graveyard. He prioritizes the empire over the ego, and the mission over the moment. This is the embodiment of Machiavelli's concept of the verita effettuale, the effectual truth of the matter. Machiavelli argued that men who focus on how the world should be, rather than how it is, will surely find their own ruin. The world should be a place where your friends are loyal, your family is supportive, and your path is clear. But the effectual truth is that people are fickle, distractions are constant, and your energy is finite. A prince must focus only on what produces a tangible result. If an interaction, a meeting, or a relationship does not yield a state benefit, meaning it doesn't increase your power, security, or wealth, it is a waste of state resources. Machiavelli would view the modern obsession with staying in the loop or being a good friend to everyone as a form of strategic suicide. If you are focused on the imaginary requirements of social politeness, you are blind to the effectual requirements of victory. You must be obsessed with the result to the point that the noise of the world becomes a faint, irrelevant hum. The homunculus is the most distracted creature in history. He is a slave to the ping of his notifications, the latest office gossip, and the emotional whims of his social circle. He spends hours every day in low-value loops, debating politics with people who have no influence, worrying about what his cousin thinks of his life choices, and responding to every emergency that isn't his. He thinks he is staying connected, but he is actually just being looted. His attention is being harvested by corporations and social vampires, leaving him with nothing left to build his own vision. He wonders why he hasn't achieved his goals, never realizing that he has spent his entire attention capital on other people's agendas. He is the man who tries to fix the leak in the sink while the foundation of the house is being washed away. To apply the sovereignty of focus today, you must perform a social tax audit. Look at the people in your life, your friends, your colleagues, even your family. Ask yourself, does this interaction yield a tangible result for my mission? If the answer is no, you must begin to withdraw your attention. This is not a negotiation. You do not owe anyone an explanation for why you are no longer available for gossip or venting sessions. Explanations are a sign of weakness. They are a request for permission to be sovereign. A man of power does not ask for permission. He simply stops responding. He stops showing up to events that drain him. He mutes the group chats that offer nothing but noise. He treats his energy as if it were his lifeblood, because it is. When you are working on your craft, your business, or your body, the world should cease to exist. If the phone rings, and it isn't about the expansion of the company, let it ring. Let them call you cold. Let them call you obsessed. In the end, they will call you sir because you were the only one who didn't look away from the prize. Your focus is your empire. Protect it with a cold, calculated ruthlessness. The final and perhaps most ethereal layer of the Shelby architecture is the mastery of presence through its total withdrawal. We call this the art of the ghost. To be a sovereign is to understand a paradox that the common man can never grasp. Your power is often at its peak when you are nowhere to be found. The common man is terrified of being forgotten. He posts his meals, his travels, and his every shallow thought on a digital glass wall, begging for a like to confirm that he still exists. He thinks that visibility equals influence. But Thomas Shelby knows that visibility is just another word for a target. The more you are seen, the more you are understood. The more you are understood, the more you are predictable. And the predictable man is already dead. He just hasn't stopped breathing yet. The ultimate manifestation of this ghosthood occurs at the very end of Thomas Shelby's journey in Season 6. After a lifetime of being the epicenter of Birmingham's storm, after being the face of the Shelby Company Limited, the Member of Parliament, and the king of the racecourses, Tommy chooses to vanish. Imagine the scene. A lone wagon on a desolate hill, the air crisp with the finality of an era. Tommy stands before a funeral pyre, not for a family member, but for himself. He burns his past, his belongings, and the very identity of Thomas Shelby that the world knew. He allows the world to believe he is gone, or perhaps that he never truly was. As the flames consume the wood, Tommy doesn't look back. He rides away on a white horse, a ghost moving through the shadows of a world that thinks it has seen the last of him. This is the prestige of power. By removing himself from the social and political equation, he gains the ultimate freedom, the power to observe without being observed, to influence without being blamed, and to exist in a state of pure, untethered sovereignty. The internal psychology of the ghost is built on the total annihilation of the ego's need for recognition. In that final scene, Tommy isn't running away out of fear. He is ascending to a higher level of strategic existence. He realizes that the Thomas Shelby the public saw was just a suit, a tool used to move pieces on a board. By discarding the suit, he becomes the hand that moves the board from the dark. He understands that the legend of his absence is more terrifying and more influential than the reality of his presence. While he is dead to the world, he is more alive and more dangerous than ever, because he is no longer bound by the expectations, the laws, or the gazes of others. He has become a myth, and a myth cannot be killed. He has reached the point where he no longer needs the world to confirm his power, because his power is entirely self-generated. He is the ghost in the machine of his own empire, watching, waiting, and choosing exactly when and if to ever reappear. Niccolò Machiavelli would have recognized this as the pinnacle of reputation management. In The Prince, he noted that men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see and few can feel. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few really know what you are. By becoming a ghost, you control the appearance by removing it entirely, forcing people to rely on their imagination. Machiavelli knew that a prince who is too familiar becomes common, and familiarity breeds contempt. By creating an aura of mystery and selective absence, you maintain a level of majesty that keeps both subjects and enemies in a state of perpetual awe and uncertainty. The ghost strategy is the ultimate form of dissimulation. It is the realization that if you are not on the stage, you cannot be trapped by the script. You become the director who works from the wings, unseen but felt in every movement of the actors. Machiavelli's ideal prince is not the one who shouts the loudest on the balcony, but the one who is whispered about in the hallways because no one is quite sure where his influence ends. In the modern world, the homum comum is a slave to his own accessibility. He is available to everyone at all times. His phone is a tracking device that allows his boss, his friends, and even strangers to demand his attention 24/7. He feels a compulsive need to reply to every message instantly, to be present at every event, and to ensure that his social circle always knows where he stands. He is a public commodity. Because he is always there, his presence has no value. He is like oxygen, necessary perhaps, but entirely taken for granted. He has no mystery, no weight, and no authority because he has no scarcity. He is terrified of the ghost because he equates silence with social death. He doesn't realize that by being everywhere, he is actually nowhere. To apply the art of the ghost today, you must reclaim the sovereignty of your presence. Start by performing a digital disappearance. Stop posting your location, your wins, and your whereabouts in real time. Let your social media go dark for weeks at a time without explanation. Let people wonder if you are winning or losing, if you are in the city or across the ocean. Silence is the mother of intrigue. In your social life, practice the Irish exit. Leave parties or gatherings without a long, drawn-out round of goodbyes. Simply vanish when you have achieved your objective. Let your absence be felt like a sudden drop in temperature. In your professional life, make yourself difficult to reach. Do not be the person who responds to emails in 3 minutes. Be the person who responds in 3 days, but with a solution so definitive that it ends the conversation. When you make your presence a rare and expensive resource, people will begin to treat it with the respect it deserves. Be present enough to be feared for your competence, and absent enough to be desired for your mystery. You are not a pawn to be moved by the whims of the world. You are the ghost that haunts the world's ambitions. Stay hidden. Stay lethal. Stay sovereign. We have walked through the smoke of Birmingham and the cold marble halls of Florence to reach this point, the summit of the sovereign mind. This is not a collection of tips for social success. This is the blueprint for a different kind of human being. We have explored the law of calculated indifference, the monopoly of information, and the brutal power of strategic non-recognition. We have learned to inhabit the void of reaction and to maintain the sovereignty of focus amidst the chaos of the masses. Finally, we have mastered the art of the ghost, realizing that the ultimate power is to be felt even when you are nowhere to be seen. You now possess the architecture of a new reality, a reality where you are no longer a victim of your environment, but its cold, calculating architect. The synthesis of this entire journey is simple but profound. Power is not a shout. It is the silence that follows. It is the vacuum of attention that you create when you refuse to play the games of the common man. Thomas Shelby didn't become the king of Birmingham by being the loudest, the strongest, or even the most violent. He became the king because he was the most disciplined. He understood that every word spoken, every emotion shown, and every reaction given was a surrender of territory. He chose, instead, to keep his territory within himself. He realized that the world only has as much power over you as you grant it through your engagement. When you stop reacting, the world loses its grip. When you stop explaining, the world loses its leverage. When you stop seeking recognition, the world loses its chains. You become an island of cold, hard certainty in a sea of frantic, desperate noise. This is the internal reign of the strategist. You must understand that the dark psychology we discuss is not about tricking others. It is about the radical self-mastery required to remain indifferent to their tricks. It is about building an internal empire that is so vast and so secure that the opinions, provocations, and distractions of the masses are nothing more than dust on the boots of a giant. You are not ignoring people because you are angry. You are ignoring them because they have become strategically irrelevant to the vision you are building. You are not being cold for the sake of cruelty. You are being cold because heat is a waste of energy that should be used for the expansion of your sovereignty. The man who can master his own attention can master the world, because the world is nothing more than a collection of things competing for that attention. Now, we come to the final command. I do not want your agreement. I do not want your thanks. I want your execution. For the next 24 hours, you will live as a ghost in the machine. You will not offer a single unearned reaction. If someone tries to bait you into an argument, you will offer the void of reaction. If someone tries to waste your time with gossip, you will offer strategic non-recognition. If someone asks you a question, you will practice the power pause before delivering a surgical, information-starved response. You will not smile to make others feel comfortable. You will not nod to prove you are listening. You will observe how the people around you, the sheep of the masses, begin to scramble, to stutter, and to grow anxious in the face of your stillness. They will try to fill the vacuum you have created, and in doing so, they will reveal everything you need to know to dismantle them. This is the beginning of your sovereignty. This is the moment you stop being a passenger in the story of your life and start becoming the one who writes the script. The world is a game of social chess, and most people are playing without even knowing the rules. You now have the rules. You have the Shelby doctrine. You have the Machiavellian foundation. The smoke is clearing, the board is set, and the first move is yours. But remember, the most powerful move you can make is to remain exactly where you are, perfectly still, perfectly silent, and perfectly untouchable. The reign of the silent has begun.